Hey everyone, this is Michael Silberling, here leading the next session of the OurNetwork and Dune series. This one focusing primarily on using parameters in your queries and generally just how to think about your dashboard's user experience. So a little bit about me. I've been working in crypto analytics for probably about 6 months now. Started off just kind of doing things on my own, following things I was interested in. Eventually, that led to some freelance opportunities, some opportunities to contribute to DAOs, working on governance proposals, treasury management grants with that one specifically with a DAO called Llama. Recently, I joined Optimism full time to do data work there. So super excited about that. Super exciting times in crypto in general. So hopefully this kind of helps others get started and start their own paths. Okay, so what we'll cover today, starting off basically what we mean, or what we mean by dashboard user experience. I think as opposed to some of the other sessions, which maybe lean more technical of how to pull data, how to read the blockchain. This really is where it gets more creative, more design focused. The point of once you have your data all created, how do you then produce it in a way to get the best results you can to drive the impact you want to drive. And second, kind of dive more technically into parameters, just basically how they work, which I've seen a lot of people have done already. So that's maybe a quick run through there. But then also want to touch on some where I call advanced parameters, but just different ways you can use parameters to kind of create a very nice front end to your user, but in the background you're doing a bunch of stuff to create something super customizable, super flexible to anything your reader might want. So on that, you've already heard me say reader a million times. I think that's the spot we're in. I think when you're actually putting your dashboard together, that's probably your first thing you got to think about is who is your ideal person you're building for. Like, who do you want to open your dashboard and be like, wow, I get so much value out of this. Maybe not too different from if anyone's done product management before, or built a product or a website or a mobile app. You need customers for your thing to actually make sense. So in this case, don't have customers, but we do have people reading your dashboard who may either take some action on it, maybe share something on Twitter, or whatever your kind of ideal end goal is. And on that too, based on kind of who you're building for, the questions that those people might have are probably different. So if you're designing something that maybe is for contributing to a governance proposal, you might want to know how are people using a protocol? Are there any competitive disadvantages? Are there any places where there is a competitive advantage? Any places that seem like good opportunities for growth or maybe untapped opportunities. Start off kind of in depth there. Another side could be if you're building maybe a freelance project for a protocol who maybe they recently launched, they have no insight into what their actual usage looks like besides what's in Etherscan or what's on the contracts. They want to know just basic things about how many users do they have? Are they growing? Maybe what are their core use cases for their users? How often is that happening? So maybe if it's a lending borrowing protocol, they might want to know, how much lend volume is there? How much borrow volume is there? How people are participating in each? What are people doing with those tokens after they take them out? Or if you're designing something, just for Twitter, you may want a big flashy graph, a big flashy number. Kind of think a lot of those ETH burning dashboards were kind of just, and I made one of them myself too, but generally going for what's a nice flashy thing that's easy to share rather than anything that will actually make someone change their behavior or make a real decision. So once you kind of recognize your reader, you recognize what you want them to be able to gain insight into from your dashboard. The third thing is just, does your dashboard make it easy to do that? So one way I kind of like to think about it is, this is again where it gets to your style. My style generally is put the most important things up top. So with this lending borrowing example, if you know that general volume is the most important thing to track, that should be up at the top or within your first, to borrow a word from web design, like above the fold. So meaning before you scroll down, my idea is before you scroll down, you should be able to see everything you'd want to see to build your initial perspective over how the system's working or how whatever you're studying is working. And then from there, once you understand that kind of basic philosophy, as you scroll down, my style is like as you scroll down, that lets you get deeper and deeper and deeper. So maybe above the fold, you show your general lending borrowing volume. As you scroll down, maybe you say, hey, here's a breakdown by token. scroll down farther, hey, maybe here's different kind of user profiles. So, however you think of it from there, and also kind of think, from these kind of follow-up questions, it is somewhat useful to have those high level total volume metrics like I talked about. But if you're going to actually make decisions, you need to get, deeper and deeper and deeper. Think of what hypotheses you might have based on that initial information, and just figure out, like, how would you answer those? So using this lending example again, maybe you have a hypothesis that a lot of the usage is maybe people farming or something. So you could think about, okay, how would you identify a farming user versus a real user, and try to, like, really, really, really dive into that. So it kind of comes again, understanding your reader, being able to ask your own questions, and kind of try to anticipate the follow-up questions before they'll come, just by thinking about, if you were doing something with your data, what would you do? What would you want to know? So, okay, enough rambling. So now I'll get into how to build some of these user experiences into your dashboard. So what we'll focus on today is parameters, which really, at the end of the day, to your end reader, really just function as filters. But in the background, what's happening is you are letting your reader control what a portion of text or a number in your query is, which maybe sounds super vague now, but we'll get into it and show it later. You can see I put some kind of examples of how I've used parameters below. So, you can let people do some time range filtering, like trailing 90 days, trailing 3 months, start date, end date, specific pool address. This token list we will get to later. But I think another super powerful thing about parameters, you'll see this. I have this top one here. I have a protocol dropdown, and you see Aave is the default selection there. But using these parameters, you can build something once, or build a dashboard once, and then any type of version of that or iteration of that any reader could want, you can just make that possible. So build once and have a ton of opportunity to reuse that dashboard for all these different use cases over and over and over again. So I'll do a basic run through and experiment with live coding and see if that doesn't take me down. So you can see here I have a pre-built query. All this is really doing is taking, let's see, what is WBTC DEX volume over the last 2 days. So boom, chart there, and then segmented by what DEX it was used on. So, fairly simple use case, trying to keep this part simple. But you could say it very obviously, like, okay, what if I don't want to do WBTC? What if I want to do ETH? What if I want to do DPI from index? What if I want to do any other kind of token? How are ways that I could use this one query and then support all those use cases? Or even, 2 days, maybe kind of narrow, or truncating by hour, kind of narrow. How can I, if I'm someone I just want to look at DEX volume for a token, there are gazillion use cases I could have based on whatever I'm trying to do. How do I support all of those in one easy way? So we'll start with parameters, the obvious answer. So again, think of parameters as a way to insert text into your query. We'll go through that. So I think one of the obvious things that a user might want control over is what token they look at. Maybe they don't want to look at WBTC forever. So what it can do, rather than hard coding in whatever the symbol is, replace that with a parameter. So click down here. That'll autofill with, yes, it is an unnamed parameter, but you'll see these little 2 curly brackets on the end, determine what's a parameter versus any other kind of thing. So to rename this, I can either type in here, like symbol, you see that update down here, or I could click this gear icon here, pops up a cleaner UI. I want to capitalize this for symbol. And you see the different types of parameters. So since this is a token symbol, text is fine. I could do a number if I wanted to, could do a date, that's a drop down, or a list where I can pre-program some things. And I'll get to that later. But for text here, pretty simple. Symbol, what do I want it to default to? Well, I could keep this as something like an NA. If I don't want to prescribe what symbol the user has, but of course there is no NA token, so this will run eventually, but we'll eventually error out. So what this is doing now is looking, does this token symbol equal this text here? So that'll eventually error out. But instead, let me just set this back to, let's do WETH here. So save that. And that's my default value. But I'll just run that real quick. And cool. So now same dashboard as before, but rather than WBTC, this is now WETH. Let's see, it looks like a lot of, what is this, light green? Uniswap, kind of expected. Maybe the Uniswap tables have kind of stopped pulling. Definitely, Uniswap tables stop pulling here. But either way, so here's WETH. And then maybe if I add this to a dashboard, we'll call this DEX example, add it to that, and then I'll open that. And boom, there's my thing. I can make this a little bigger for the screen. And you'll see up here the parameter that I set is also now showing up here. So I can just type in, you see default is WETH. And I can type in WBTC if I want to go back to that, press apply, and it runs. While it's running, you'll see that the text up here, the link to my dashboard, changes to reflect that parameter. So you'll see it's Dune XYZ, yada, 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 and then question mark symbol equals WBTC. So when you get into the advanced section, that's definitely super powerful. You can kind of deep link to any kind of parameterized version of your dashboard you could want. So hypothetically, I could just replace this here and say, let's call it DPI. And I could send someone this link. I can just open it in a new tab. And this runs the same dashboard, but with DPI. And I'll go back here, WBTC finished running. See, it's completely different than the WETH one because it is a new token. And over here, once DPI finishes, we'll see the same thing. Cool, so that's basic parameters. And just for completeness, I will parameterize really as much as I can in here, what I would do in real life. So one thing I could do, my interval, rather than force into 2 days, I'll make this trailing number of days. See, that pops up there now. I'll make my default 7 days. So now when I run this query, it'll just autofill this parameter here with the number 7. What else can I do? So you'll see here, these random intervals, probably, what is that? So that's me trying to localize the dashboard to my time zone. So I'm in US Pacific time, -7 hours off, but something feasibly that a user might want to localize to their own local time zone. So let's parameterize that as a name. And I want this to go in both places here. Could also probably put this in its own with statement of like what my interval offset hours are, but this works for now. And just one nuance on UTC offset, since I've done this a lot, but the number field cannot take in a negative. So I'm pressing the minus sign a lot and nothing's coming up. But you can format this as text and it works just fine too. So -7. What else might I want to parameterize here too? Oh, interesting. So I could do right here, so I have category specific to a DEX, but probably very reasonable that if maybe I have a project and I'm looking at my specific project's token, maybe I do want to know, like, okay, it's nice to know what DEXs get volume, but what about aggregators as well? So parameterize this. I'll call it exchange type. And here's where I can make it a list and say, okay, I know my two options here are DEX and then aggregator. I think that's the right, actually. Let me check on that real quick. Okay, so live coding, thing number 1 happening. Actually, you'll see here, okay, so select category. I've noticed sometimes just doing group by instead of distinct will run faster. I probably should make this way smaller. Where block time is greater than, just like the last hour trade should be fine. Oh, interval. Okay. DEX and aggregator, correct. Cool. Okay, so these two options would work. And now similarly, if I just ran this query as is, you'd see same results as before. While this is running, I'll point out, you can see that the parameters automatically sorted by alphabetical order. But for my own experience, like I think the first thing a user would want to do is pick a symbol. Second thing I want them to do is pick a trailing number of days. They'll do exchange type third, and then UTC offset fourth. But since they sort alphabetically, how can I kind of force this? My trick, my style at least, is put a number in front. So 1 symbol, 2 trailing number of days, 3 exchange type, and 4 UTC offset. So now if I cancel this and rerun it, boom, see all these arrange in order. And if I refresh this dashboard here, you'll see they display in order here, which is very nice. So I can just pick aggregator while it's running in the background. Okay, and you'll see here, so this deep link didn't work anymore since I did change the parameter name. But if I just go back to this, there you go. So the link name's updated. You can see now also it's also populating in that I adjusted the exchange type to be an aggregator, the symbol to be WBTC, and the rest are all defaults. So I'll let that run for a second. Okay, cool, perfect. So now you see these are WBTC trades last 7 days, aggregators. You can see here, these are all aggregators, and with my localized UTC offset. Another thing here is sometimes maybe truncating by hour kind of, I can't really gain any insight out of this. Just a lot of spikes up and down, a lot of dark blue, I guess, but I don't know what else is really going on. So I could also parameterize, which I usually do, the date trunk. So let's do that here. And I want that to be actually, so I'll rename my numbers a little bit. I want that to be second. Actually make this a little complicated. So you'll see what I just did. Since I was typing in these 2 brackets earlier, it was just reading all these brackets here. So artificially kind of created some confusion. So let's remove the extra stuff. My fault there of trying to do things too fancy. So I'll rename these 3, 4, 5. Dora the Explorer. Okay. Time granularity, I'll make this a list too. The options I want to give, minute is too narrow, hour seems reasonable, day seems reasonable. If they really want to go crazy, I'll give them week and month as well. Year would be too much, I want to do year. Oh, C2, so hour, I want to default to day. I like day better, especially when I make my default 7. I would prefer the default to be default 7 days than default 7 hours. Yeah, okay, I did that correctly. So now save and run to make everything update. Similarly here, I'll just take out this link because that's all changed now. Okay, so would be fun. Let's just do where the index aggregator trades the last day by hour in my local offset. Changing as much as I can. You can see like everything here changed. So you'll see when we get into the advanced section, how we can use this URL string to do some pretty cool things. And perfect, cool. So DPI by hour, looks like there's some person went big on pair swap. Interesting. And you can see here, there are some gaps in the way we've set it up where, there's this trades at 4 a.m. local time, then 8 a.m. local time, that big gap there. So if you look at previous lectures, we talked about how to use generated series to fill in those hour gaps if you want to, but for another time. All right, so now that we've kind of gone through basic parameters, and really over-engineering a DEX trades query, let me get this back up. Did prepare some exercises, so let's make a thing. So kind of 2 options here. One is taking a staking dashboard or staking query from Impossible Finance that we produced in a previous lecture. Take that and kind of think about what are things that people might want to control while they're reading it. And the second one is using this DEX volume query that I started with. What are some other things that you might want to do there? So I'll pause there and come back on once and walk through some of these. And we're back. Hope you had fun. So let's jump into, I think I already kind of went through the DEX volume one as much as I could. Let's pull up the impossible finance one. Okay. Cool. So going over this query real quick, really not important everything that's happening here yet, but you can see here at the very end you get to these amount of tokens staked and unstaked by these numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, just tracks. So different kind of launchpad events here, and you kind of all go and see through. Potential problem as a reader is maybe you look at this on day one and you're like, wow, great, I can visualize all this, cool. But maybe today, once you've understood all this to be true, you've internalized all of this, maybe you want to focus on a much more granular section here. So what are potential things we could do? Well, one, familiarize yourself with the data set. This track ID are the numbers you've shown before. Running amount is the numbers that are going up and down. Amount map is just the daily change, and then this date time field here too. So one obvious thing I can think of is maybe, I'm on the product team there and I decide, I really want to monitor track 7, what happened there. So just general track ID equals, maybe I'll name this parameter track ID. And I could just in a list put 0, 1, 2, 3, but then that would be kind of on me to continuously update that based on all different tracks that'll happen. So just to try to enforce more liveness and less chance of it kind of going stale, I'm just going to make this force as a number. I can default to 0 maybe. So if I run this, you'll see again it's inserting the 0 into the query. The only rows I have are for track ID 0, and boom, that's what it looks like. Now let me test stuff. Ooh. Okay, went too fast. Okay, cool. So all these similar to what we went to before, but just another example from another query of things you might want to do. And then on the DEX side, already went through this. Maybe did the exercise up front already. Maybe you found some other things you wanted to parameterize. Maybe pick a certain DEX, pick a certain aggregator. All kinds of things you could possibly do here. So now with this, we'll jump into more of the advanced sections of parameters. So again, same parameters, but using them a little differently. So one thing to touch on is thinking about parameters from your dashboard level. So one thing that's really cool that you can do is if you have maybe multiple queries in the same dashboard, if your parameter names and your parameter values are identical across each of them, those will all be aggregated together in your dashboard. So I could have the example I showed. I could have a DEX trades dashboard, and I could have that same impossible finance staking dashboard. But if I have the same date parameters for both of them, then they would both work the exact same. So even though they're completely different, parameters work the exact same. So I'll show that. And the second one is using your parameters to build custom logic, which is cool. Confusing at first. Once you get the hang of it, very cool. So the example here of where we do that, see this token list drop down, we filter to top tokens. There's nothing on chain or nothing in the world that says what is a top token, what's not a top token. So that's something that we define ourselves. So we'll get into that. But for the user, they just get a very easy, like, yeah, I want to see top tokens, click on it. You can do a similar thing with maybe just stable coins, maybe just DeFi tokens, whatever you want to do. So talk through the building blocks for that. So I think I'm going to go the chaos route that I just said. Let's combine once I find it, let's combine our impossible finance query with this query. So what I'm going to do is just use the same time granularity and trailing number of days and UTC offset, oh man, and see what that does for us there. Okay, so live how to do it. I think if you're going to reuse parameters, the best way to do it is probably just fork your query, because then your parameters auto follow with you. But since these are already built and completely different, I'm just kind of going to do this a little manually. So DEX trades query here, possible finance query here. I will keep the track ID here, but I think I might make this, just name this a little cleaner so it's clear what this goes to. Let's see my They go up to 5 here, so I'm going to name this 6. And then, let's see how to do this. Yeah, I should be able to just copy this whole block time. That actually might work. If I just copy all this, I'll make that an and. So you can see here that when I copy and pasted that line in, the parameters here did autofill, but the default values did not. So this is where I need to make sure they match up. So that's 7. I think actually, I'm not sure exactly, but if they don't match up, there is some way that it'll pick one of them. Not sure exactly how. I usually have them match up because I don't want to do anything kind of crazy like that. I want to have control over what I'm producing. Okay, so trailing number of days is in there, UTC offset's in there. But since I want this UTC offset to actually influence the real block time we show also, yeah, I'll add that here, but keep the same column name. That should work. Block time does not exist. Oh yeah, I have this as DT already. Do I truncate this somewhere earlier? I do truncate it by hour. Okay, so I know what I'll do. So I still want that. Since I truncate this by hour, and I have a time granularity up here too. Actually, I think I said I was going to do this, and I just completely forgot to. So live coding error averted. Okay, so my date trunks here to be hour. Since my whole dashboard's in hours, I also want my series here to be in hours. Extra quote in there. What else? Anything else that I need to? I think that's good. I think this is also where I like as a general practice to try to do, at least for me, for my simplicity, like do my date trunking and offsetting as early as possible, and then just use this date time field and have that all the way through so I don't have to worry about anything. Of course, my offsets happen later, but in general, pretend it was better. Okay, so here for this list for time granularity, I want this list to exactly match in the default selection in the order. So I'm just going to go back over here and see what I did. So this whole list, but it is by day. It's the default. There we go. Now it should work. Ambiguous. Oh yeah. So I use gs.dt above, so I'm going to use that here also. Perfect. So track ID 0, trailing 7 days from today. So there are no moves on track ID 0. So maybe actually what I want to do here, because there is kind of it's multiple filters going on that could maybe it's very confusing to a reader to have to do a date granularity and select a track ID. So maybe I will make this, instead of just the track ID, the minimum track ID. So maybe I know that everything before 3 I don't want to look at. I just want to look at everything afterwards. So I can just make it greater than equal to here, and that should be easier. Where the user's real control is the date range, not so much being dependent on whatever the track was. So it looks like not much difference here, which is good to know. As if you're someone from Impossible Finance, no real activity the last 7 days, which is definitely a different story than the last dashboard. We were looking at everything go up and down, up and down. Okay, so matches. So now the chaos. I am going to add this to my DEX example dashboard, which when I talk about making a good dashboard user experience, this is probably the worst dashboard user experience you could have. Interesting. No results from the query. Why is that? Maybe it's refresh. Maybe this day. Maybe the date range is too small. Interesting. Okay, what is different here? Live coding error number 1. Okay, day, mid track ID, trailing number of days. I'm sure someone sees my issue and I'm just not catching it at all. See, I think this 7. Do I have like a greater than, or I need a greater than? I don't have a greater than. Maybe it should be greater than equal to. Yeah, because I do truncate this. Yeah, maybe that's not it, but I'm just going to say that's it. It's probably it. Well, actually, no, because I don't want one of these to be greater than equal to one of these to be greater than. So it should be the same. If I make this trailing 1 day, do I get anything? No, I don't. Hmm. Well, I did find one thing that might be a little off. So since this now field is not offset by time zone, then I don't need to add this into there either. So not the issue, but definitely a contributor. Oh, found the issue here. So the issue here was that my series that I use here is just the min and max of all events on this contract. We can see that there were no events since for the last 3 days by today. So yeah, trailing 1 day should be no data. What I need to do actually is just make this now, and then I want that to fit this time granularity. So I will trunk it. Let's copy this here. So trunking now to my selected time granularity, that's my whole series. And now if I make this 1 day, that should more than one row returned by query use it as a stub expression. Well, this is something I did here. I don't think it is. I probably changed something else. Yeah, no, it's not that. So what else did I change? Ah, okay. So this should be, so yeah, so now this generate series is multiple since this is, yeah, so I don't want to select this from the events table because that's selecting one row for everything in events. So it is something that I did, kind of. There we go. Okay, so yeah, no events here. Trailing 1 day. What does this query actually look like? Yeah, maybe a front end thing. I don't know why running amount is not showing anything. Maybe it's because there's only one date time here. Well, either way, not the. So something weird with this query, not the point of. Oh wait. So here I actually do want to do that UTC offset so they match. So that's why I'm like cutting out 7 hours total. That is not why. Okay, actually, I don't think there's any error. It's just that I'm not picking anything with multiple x-axes and it's a time series. Okay, dumb live coding error number something. Someone else count for me and let me know what my number was. Okay, cool. So now move on from this stuff. Basic concept here is two completely distinct queries, and now I have my parameters here that work across both of them. So I can make, so DPI, this symbol only applies here, so that won't change anything. But I can choose this back to what I was looking at before, trailing 1 day by hour. See, both of these now start rerunning. They're queued for a while, but once they do finish running, they would both return results with respect to these parameter options here. So next part of advanced parameters I want to talk about is this custom logic piece. So for that, I will jump back into the DEX trades here. And so what I want to do here, we'll take the index tokens as an example. And I have a list of the index tokens up here somewhere. Yep, here we go. So I put this together. Let's go back here. Not super important what this is, but essentially I'm creating a small little table that I say I have the tokens of index, DPI. I say this is a sector token, so it's just DeFi, MVI is metaverse sector. These two are sector tokens, but then the flexible leverage index tokens, calling them leverage. And the point being that if I'm looking at activity, if I'm indexed, I'm looking at activity, I think that the use case of investing in a sector token and the use case of using a leverage token are very different. I think those are different user bases. I think those are different purposes. So I may want to look at those differently and not kind of conflate one with the other. So one option you can see up here, I have the code commented out to create a view out of this where I can reference it like a table. But just for simplicity and keeping everything in one screen right now, I will just copy this over. So now I have this whole with index tokens as, and then my whole thing here. So what I could potentially do here is, instead of having the user type in a symbol, maybe if I know I'm just in the index universe, I could do, say select, so I want the token symbol equal to, I want this to be address instead, actually, just to be certain that there's not multiple of the same token symbol. So select token from index tokens where category equals, and if I wanted to just like hard code in, I'll just hard code it in first, where category equals sector, or this for token B address where category equals sector. Did this again. Oh. Okay, add another tally to the live coding error list. Okay, so I'll return, oh perfect, it ran quickly. All these tokens together, so actually here, instead of segmenting by project, I want to segment by symbol. So actually what I'll do here, and this will just make it easier for the next steps in the future, rather than doing an OR here, I'm just gonna use token A and then union it to the token B volume. So you'll see why that makes sense later. Token A symbol, especially for the more advanced thing we'll do here, like we will need to do this. So I'm just adding in token A symbol. So these will be all where token A is in this sector category. Yeah, I'll keep that as is. And then union all. So whenever you union, it's probably been touched on before, but just if I just said union like that, it would also search and remove duplicates. But that is way more, if you don't need that, that's way more intensive than just doing union all, which doesn't look for duplicates and just appends the two together. So here I want to do token B in there. Union them all together. That'll do what I want to do. So I'll get by date. Actually, I don't want to do by project anymore. I just want to do by symbol. So take that out here and just make sure that you make the same updates in both. One of the very common errors I'll make, maybe I made here. Yep, I did. Well, not that one exactly, but unioning two tables together and missing some columns back and forth there. Okay, cool. So that ran now. Yeah, you can see all these symbols here. These are just those sector symbols. I don't have any of the flexible leverage indices. You can group by the symbol here, and boom. So a lot of DPI, some random MVI buys. Cool. Now the next more advanced step is, we could do what we did before and say, oh, let's have the user just put in, token category there. Put it in there as well. And I could say, okay, I know the two options are sector or leverage. And they could just pick leverage there instead, just to show it for completeness. And boom, leverage ran. Okay, whatever your takeaways are there, you can take them. But now this brings up a question of, well, what if I wanted to see all of these tokens? Like, I don't care about sector or leverage, I want to see everything. I could just be like, okay, all tokens is an option. But if I pick it, since that's not an option that exists in my table, nothing happens. So this kind of gets at the first kind of customizable thing to build with parameters, but how can I create this all tokens category and have that work? I'll pause for a minute if you want to try it, but then I'll jump into how I would do it. Okay, we're back. So this is one, did a lot of just random Googling to eventually find out this trick of how I would do it. So the way to think about really anything in this where section here is what you're ultimately doing is for each row, does all this return true? If yes, then yes, the row is valid, return that row. If this returns false, then no, you do not return the row. So we can kind of manipulate this a little bit, and I'll move this up here so we can just focus on this token address list here. Okay, so we have right now where token address is in this, where the category equals that. Easy. But we will have we want to create this all tokens thing. So I'll just write out how I do it, and probably easier to just do that and explain as I go. I'm just going to put this all in a big parentheses here just to kind of self-contain it. So I just want to create a statement that is true for the situation that I want. So a way to do that is just do 1 equals. So if I actually had this, if I had 1 equals 1 as my where clause, that would just return everything because 1 equals 1 is always true. So if I leave the left side like this, how do I manipulate the right side to return true? And I want it to return true. E, not a Q. I don't know how that got in there. Case statement. So I can do case when token category equals all tokens, then what do I want to happen? I could say 1, and if I actually did 1 every token under the sun, then like, yes, that would work. But I have another, when I say all tokens, I really mean, is it in this list? So the conditions I want to be true, when that category is all tokens and token address is in here, except without the category filter. So when category is all tokens and my token is in the token list, then true, then 1 equals 1. Cool. And I may have my other scenarios as well. We'll throw another 1 in there. So when other stuff happens, 1. When other stuff happens, 1. But then if none of these parameters are met, I don't want it to return true. So the example, when I say all tokens, I don't want WBTC to return. I don't want WETH to return in there. So if none of these parameters are met, just else 0. Just building that true false statement that way. And then you end it. So now I'll just do the rest here. So we'll see. So token category, all tokens. Okay, so if that's not true, then it's what we had before. Just when that's in there, then 1. So when the category, so essentially we're saying when the token category is all tokens, we want it to be true if it's anywhere in that list. That fails, then we just want our regular, is the token address in the specific category that we picked, then 1, else 0. And I can copy that down to the next where I do it down here, but change everything to token B address. Okay, I think that is everything. Let's see. Whew. No query errors. We'll see what actually happens. Perfect, it worked. So now this all tokens drop down. I get all the tokens that were in that list. And this is another example for that. Imagine I wanted to say, well, yeah, let's say, so DPI and MVI were indexes first 2 tokens, if I remember correctly. I believe that to be true. Maybe not the point anyway. If I wanted to add that as an option, that could practically or feasibly be something that a person would want to do. So if I pick DPI and MVI, I would do, maybe I'll add in here. I want that to come before like the general, well, actually it shouldn't matter where it comes, but when token category equals DPI and MVI, yeah, what I would do here, so I want the token list to be in this symbol, in this token list, where symbol in DPI MVI, do I have the right amount of parentheses in, oh man, I think I do. Yeah, let's roll with it. So what's saying here is I have this hard-coded in DPI and MVI, but I'm saying that that's true when the address meets these parameters from my token list above. So again, you're giving your dashboard readers like really granular flexibility into any kind of combination they might want, and you're just doing a bunch of this stuff on the back end just to make that experience super easy. And something is screwed up. Token, oh, I forgot to change this. It's token A. So instead of just returning other stuff. Boom. DPI and MVI. Let's go leverage. So at this point, I think we have a good parameter. It's just fun to click around. So that's what I'm doing. boom, leverage is done, sector is done. So I think from this case, if you were Index or you were anyone else building a list like this, I would think one, I would make this a view rather than one just in a query, so I could just reference this in other any other query I could want, and then just as you add more tokens, I know there's a bunch in the pipeline. You could have like other kind of sector things, or maybe you add another section here for like who the methodologist is. Maybe you want to test out are certain methodologists, or maybe something has a marketing arm behind it. Are they better? So you can say like that one's Index, that one's Bankless, or you can say maybe this one's like a media methodologist, and you think about growth for your future. Maybe you do want media methodologists. Maybe you don't want media methodologists, but as you get more samples, more tokens, those are things you can kind of provide that flexibility for, and you can test out. Cool. So almost near wrapping up. Other kind of exercise options. I showed going down further paths with that DEX trades query. I think if you want to take a query dashboard you've made, I know a lot of people here have already kind of been building their own thing throughout this whole course. So any ideas that you kind of came up with through going through this, whether it's using parameters across multiple queries, maybe kind of custom coding your own drop-down options, definitely try to go through that if you can. Otherwise, I pulled up, kind of staying down the path of Index here. They have like very, very good dashboards overall. One thing that I noticed though, they have this, again, I talk about dashboard design and kind of like, what is your experience? What I like a lot is that they have up top are just, their North Stars. So if you want to get like just a total super quick understanding of how the Index protocol is performing, like boom, you have your address exposure, you have your unit supply, all these things you could possibly want are essentially here. And as you scroll down, you're like, okay, here's some other KPIs, trading volume, net deposit flow, all these kinds of things. You get further down now, okay, here's token specific things. I might look at this and say, like data just launched. I can't really tell the difference between that and other stuff. So let me just scroll down and see. And okay, here's all this stuff for data. And I go up, there's BED, there's MVI, BTC 2x fly. So maybe that was before MVI. ETH 2x fly. So this is still, I think they have 6 tokens now. Somewhat scrollable, but I think if you imagine the future where there's 10 tokens, 15 tokens, 20 tokens, like you're not gonna, this is gonna be impossible to scroll down. So maybe they're almost at a point where you got to think about how do you take this dashboard, all the super good stuff on it, and just make it as easy as possible for a reader, for a user to do stuff with. So let me just jump into this one. So DPI address exposure, ton of complicated stuff in here, I'm sure, about like, is DPI in a liquidity pool? Is it in Aave? Is it wherever it's in? How do you associate? Who owns it? Do not do not envy this. But what you see at the top here is just the one, what distinguishes this as a DPI query versus anything else, just this up here. When token symbol equals DPI, and you'll take this Uniswap V2 pool section as an example. They join on that to make sure that that's the only token they're looking at. So I'm sure if I change this to MVI, to WBTC, to ETH, to ETH2x fly, still some dependencies on the rest of this query, but essentially this could be generalized to any token, maybe any token in the index ecosystem, or maybe even focusing on a specific category of token or a specific sector like we looked at before. So I think one very interesting exercise option could be, how do you take all of these token specific dashboards and just build one thing, or maybe there's a drop down or a text box to make it generalizable to any token they might have in the future. So when there are 20 index tokens, you can just kind of click around through drop downs and not have to scroll for years to get to what you want to get to. So good problem to have too many tokens, but I think interesting opportunity for someone to dive into and really explore parameters. And last, I forgot something. Okay, so where I mentioned before, and let's see where I can find it up here. Yeah, you can see it up here too. How these queries here, when you add in a parameter, they change the URL based on what the parameter is like. Okay, so potential use case of this. So I have this Uniswap dashboards I made previously, where as a user you put in the Uniswap pool address, and then you can load all this deep dive information about the Uniswap pool. So even where we had this DEX trades info before, I could look up what's a Uniswap pool ID for one of these tokens. So DPI loaded up a second ago. Let's grab this DPI ETH pool. If I remember where my dashboard was, ooh, look, found it. Put that pool ID in here. You'll see this address or this URL changes up here. And now it loads, with all these other parameters, leaving them as defaults. If I want to deep dive into the DPI ETH 0.3% fee tier on Uniswap, here's all the information about it. Liquidity is not matching where it should be right now. All these other things. So the thing that's really cool I can do with parameters is if I maybe take those index DEX queries and I can relate that to what the pool address is, I can create a link in that query results to then send the user to go here to deep dive that query a little further. So it may be confusing. I'll just do that live real quick. But I can see down here, what I'm just going to pull from is since I just never remember HTML, but that's how you link between dashboards, is just basic HTML. So I'll take that, and then wherever I was. So I know, at least in DEX trades, exchange contract address is the pool. I'll just copy this here. So rather than segment by symbol, I'll segment by this. So maybe now what I'm doing when I query this is saying for all sector category tokens, what are the different liquidity pools and how do they all operate? So, these random hashes mean nonsense. Well, actually, too, I need to make sure this is just Uniswap and just Uniswap v3, because I saw there was at the point where it's weird, I recognize what a balancer pool looks like, but I saw a balancer pool address in there. I've spent too much time doing DEX stuff. Okay, here we go. Now here's all this Uniswap pool IDs. And you know what? I'll just make this all tokens because fun. But either way, maybe I'll just to make this cleaner, I'll just do a little subquery. I'm going to eventually put something there. And this is where I scroll too fast. People get mad at me. I make my subqueries just like A, B, C. Probably not the best, but whatever. Okay, so now select all the information from here. And now I'm going to load in what the URL should be to then deep link me, where I can just pick one of these pools and then link to this whole dashboard here. So again, I'll take the HTML code because I don't want to rewrite it, and find whatever tab I was on. Was it this one? Oh, it was this one. Cool. Okay, so it's actually just happening here is these like two parallel things are just concatenating. I'll just make this a little nicer. So I'm saying, this link at first would be to the Uniswap info page, but it would be for this URL, insert this text, follow that text, then that text, and that text. Either way. So exchange contract address is already there. Nice. And since these are formatted in /x instead of 0x, I'm just using this replace function to say if there is a /x, make it a 0x, doing that both places. But this dashboard, if I did this would actually take me to the Uniswap pool. Maybe I'll leave that. That's actually kind of nice. Uniswap pool URL. And actually, we'll see if this works. If I remember my HTML well enough to make this open up in a new tab, we will see. So that's Uniswap pool URL. I also might want to do, the first thing I wanted to do, my dashboard URL. So you can see I have all this stuff up here, pool address coming after it in the 0x format. I'll open the right tab, perfect. Okay, so just grab everything to the left of it. That's all I need, right? I think so. Cool. and I'll name this, I'll just like Dune pool URL. Yeah, I'll run that real quick. Why? Oh, I called this pool instead of exchange contract address. I tried to make that simpler by doing that, and I made it more complicated. Okay, so now if I go to query results, you'll see Uniswap pool URL. See in the bottom left, that URL kind of autofills. So I'll just click on this one here. Okay, the graph is down. Cool. If I click this one, boom, MBI WETH autofills. Probably ran this recently. Yeah, it's still running a little bit, 13 hours ago. But here we go. Cool. So the graph is down, but we are up. Or maybe I screwed up something with the URL. That's also very likely. Did I screw something up with the URL? I did screw something up with the URL. It's our problem. So the actual code I need is accounts pools. So it's always good to double check. Well, okay, I guess both could be true. Anyway, so pretending that these all worked. Since this is again just HTML, I can just name these something that's a little easier. So can call this Uniswap pool link, and this is just based on the between the two brackets is the text, general HTML stuff, and this is I'll call this like pair deep dive dashboard. And boom. So now, actually, I can put this back on my initial, well, pretend, I usually like, well, yeah, I'm going to do this. Or time, pool address, USD volume. In case no one's really like gone into formatting much, I always do like something like this. I like these to be right aligned, and boom. Add that back to the DEX example dashboard. Do I have that open still? Do. Oh yeah, and these things will autofill up here. Oh, I did 1 hour. Yeah, that's nothing. You just make that 1 week or 7 days. Then the DEX. There you go. I guess one thing to change here is since I am limiting to Uniswap here, I never want a DEX anymore once I find this, because Uniswap is not an aggregator, so I only want DEXs. So it's one thing to note, actually, is if you comment out your parameters, they'll still be live on the dashboard. So maybe I'll just like, where I find it. So it's still there. I have to delete them both for it to actually disappear. Now it's gone. I can press save and run, refresh this, and boom. Once it runs, very cool. Yeah, maybe these pool addresses mean nothing. Maybe you want to name them by the symbols eventually. All kind of options there. Let's see, actually, if I do all tokens, I can see which one had the greatest daily volume. And guess what that is? Oh, all the same pool address. So that's interesting. Or mostly the same pool address. So let's see, actually. I suspect this is DPI. But then the one that snuck in there, what is that? This, oh, CA7. Let's go to the Uniswap pool link for that one. Oh, forgot. Guess we got to use Dune. Oh, also DPI. What was this one then? Maybe it's ETH2xFly. Wow, look at that. So interesting kind of takeaway here. Man, these leverage products do a lot of volume. So DPI ETH there, ETH2xFly there. Same dashboard, two completely different pools, two different use cases. I just think it's like super powerful to be able to do. Cool. So with that, went on way longer than I expected, just across an hour. Can talk about this forever. Thanks for sitting through it. Talk to y'all in the class and answer any questions. And excited to see what y'all build. Thanks.